The forest was alive with whispers that evening. The wind twisted through the ancient trees, carrying the scent of wet earth and moss. Rain had fallen lightly earlier, leaving the forest floor slick and glistening under the dim light of a silver moon. Streams of water ran along the paths, and somewhere in the distance, the river roared with a force that both terrified and mesmerized. Elara walked quickly along a narrow path, her cloak wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Her satchel swung against her hip, heavy with herbs and bandages she had gathered for the week. Her life had always been quiet, measured by the rhythms of the forest and the needs of the creatures who wandered too close to danger. She had a way with the injured and the lost birds with broken wings, deer caught in hunters' traps, foxes with teeth torn by rival packs. But tonight, something deeper, stranger, called to her. A sudden splash interrupted the night's quiet. It was sharp and urgent, unlike the playful jump of a fish or the ripple of rain. Elara froze, straining her ears. There it was again, a desperate thrash of water, closer now, coming from the riverbank below. Without thinking, she ran toward the sound. The slope to the river was steep, and the mud made her boots slide with every step. She reached the edge just in time to see a massive creature struggling in the current. Its fur was dark and soaked, clinging to a body large enough to rival a small horse. One of its legs seemed caught in a twisted root, dragging it deeper into the river. "Elara," a voice whispered in her mind, though she knew she was alone. Her heart hammered. The wolf's eyes, golden and desperate, met hers, and she felt a strange pull, as if the creature was calling not just for help, but for something more: trust, faith, even life itself. She dropped her satchel, shoved aside the branches, and stepped closer to the water. The river was cold and merciless. The wolf lunged against the current, splashing her coat and chilling her to the bone. Fear gnawed at her chest, but a stronger instinct, one that had guided her all her life, urged her forward. She would not let this creature die. With a deep breath, she waded into the water. The current tugged at her legs, threatening to pull her downstream, but she focused on the wolf. She reached its side, pressing against its shivering body. Its eyes, wide with panic. For a moment, she imagined what it would be like if the wolf could speak. If it could tell her the stories of the forest, the dangers of the dark woods, the secrets of the hidden paths. "Hold still," she whispered, wrapping her arms around its torso. "I won't let you go," the wolf growled softly. A low, uneasy sound. But it did not struggle as fiercely now, as if it understood that she meant no harm. Inch by inch, she worked to free its trapped leg. The roots were stubborn, biting into the wolf's fur and skin. She bit her lip, ignoring the scratch of a thorn against her hand. Finally, with a Herculean pull, the root released its hold, and the wolf staggered free, shaking water and mud from its soaked body. Elara helped it to the riverbank, collapsing beside it for a moment, breathing heavily. The wolf's eyes never left hers. Something in them made her pulse quicken, a sense of recognition she could not name. It was as though the wolf saw through her, past the surface, into the depths of her heart. "Rest," she murmured, gathering dry leaves and cloth from her satchel. She tore strips of fabric to wrap around the wolf's wounded leg. It was deep, likely from a hunter's cruel trap, but it had not pierced any vital veins. She worked quickly, dipping a cloth in the water to wash the mud from the wound, her hands moving instinctively. The wolf remained still, a quiet force beside her. Its golden eyes shone in the moonlight, almost human in their depth. She had never seen a wolf like this: majestic, commanding, almost regal. She wondered at the wildness it carried, the strength that had kept it alive against the river, against the storm, against her own hesitation. By the time she finished, the sky had begun to lighten with the first hints of dawn. The storm clouds had parted slightly, leaving silver ribbons of moonlight and the faint promise of sun. The wolf sat, shaking slightly, exhausted, and for the first time, it lifted its head and looked directly at her, not with fear, but with acknowledgement. Elara felt a shiver run down her spine. The forest seemed to hold its breath. There was a weight in the air, an unspoken energy, as if the trees themselves watched. She realized the wolf was more than an animal. It carried a presence that demanded respect, even awe. Then, as if deciding something, the wolf rose and limped a few steps toward the shadows of the forest. It paused, turning its head back toward her. Its eyes, golden and intense, seemed to convey a message she could not yet understand. And then it was gone, slipping into the trees with a grace that belied its massive size. Elara stayed by the riverbank long after the wolf had disappeared. The pendant she had not noticed before gleamed faintly in the mud where the creature had rested. It was silver, etched with strange symbols that hummed faintly under her fingers. She picked it up, her curiosity battling with a vague unease. Something about the pendant felt alive, as though it carried a heartbeat of its own. She slipped it into her satchel, deciding she would examine it further later. For now, she returned to her small cabin at the edge of the forest, her mind racing with questions she could not answer. Who or what was that wolf? And why had it felt like more than a wild animal? That night, Elara dreamed of the wolf. Or perhaps it was not a dream. She saw him in a vast forest, standing tall on two legs, cloaked in shadows. His eyes, the same golden hue, burned with intensity, and his voice, deep and commanding, echoed in her mind. "Help me," it said, "or lose yourself in what is to come." She woke with a start, her heart pounding. The morning light filtered through her window, but the sense of urgency lingered. Something had changed in the forest, in her life, and perhaps in the wolf himself. Over the next few days, Elara could not shake the feeling that she was being watched. The forest seemed quieter, almost expectant. Birds did not sing in their usual places, and the usual chatter of creatures in the underbrush was muted. She wondered if it was paranoia, or if the wolf, or whatever he truly was, had left a mark upon her life, a bond she could not yet comprehend. Every so often, she caught glimpses of movement among the trees. Shadows flickered where none should be, and the hair on the back of her neck rose, as though something unseen passed too close. And always, in her mind, the wolf's eyes returned, burning with a quiet fire, watching, waiting. One evening, as she prepared herbs in her cabin, she heard a rustle outside. She froze, listening. The sound came again, soft but deliberate. Cautiously, she approached the window and peered into the fading light. For a moment, she saw nothing. Then, a dark figure slipped behind the trees, moving with the grace of a predator. Elara's breath caught. The wolf, or whatever he was close. Her heart raced, not with fear, but with something she did not yet understand. A sense of connection, of destiny, intertwined. That night, she could not sleep. She sat by her small fire, the silver pendant clutched in her hand, tracing the strange symbols etched into its surface. Her mind drifted back to the river, to the wolf's golden eyes, and to the commanding presence that had seemed almost human in its intelligence and intensity. Somewhere deep in the forest, a shadow moved. A low, almost inaudible growl echoed through the trees, carrying a warning, or perhaps a promise. Elara did not know it yet. But the wolf she had saved was no ordinary creature. He was a king, an alpha, bound by curses and ancient rivalries. And in saving him, she had set in motion forces far greater than herself. The pendant pulsed faintly in her hand. She could not explain why, but she knew that her life had changed forever. The forest was no longer just a place of quiet work and simple life. It was a world of secrets, of power, and of something far older and more dangerous than she could yet imagine. Outside, the shadows deepened. Eyes gleamed from the darkness, watching her, waiting, and a voice, soft but filled with authority, whispered through the wind. "Do not forget me, healer, for you have saved more than a wolf. You have saved a king." Ilara shivered, a mixture of fear and wonder coursing through her. She did not yet understand the truth of the words, but she felt their weight. Whatever lay ahead, it would change everything she knew about the forest, about life, and about herself. The river flowed on, dark and relentless, hiding secrets beneath its surface, and somewhere in its depths, a golden-eyed king waited, wounded, silent, and bound by a fate that only she could begin to unravel. The forest had changed in the days after the river incident. Shadows seemed deeper, the air heavier, and every rustle in the underbrush made Ilara's heart leap. She moved with caution, sensing that the presence she had felt at the river lingered still. The silver pendant pulsed faintly whenever she neared the riverbank, as if calling her toward something she did not yet understand. Ilara's days were filled with her usual tasks, gathering herbs, tending to injured creatures, but each night she returned to her cabin with the feeling that she was being observed. She told herself it was imagination. The forest played tricks, after all. Yet a part of her could not ignore the pull she felt, a draw that went beyond fear or curiosity. Then, on the 5th night after the river, he returned. She had been gathering water from a hidden spring deeper in the forest when movement caught her eye. A tall figure stepped from between the trees, his cloak brushing the undergrowth. Her breath hitched. The wolf's golden eyes had returned only now. They belonged to a man. He was massive, broad-shouldered, and radiated a presence that commanded the forest itself. His hair, dark and tangled, like the shadows around him, framed a face that was striking in its intensity, and those eyes still golden, still piercing, locked onto hers. "Ilara," he said, his voice deep, measured, yet carrying an authority that made her knees weaken slightly. "You saved me." Her hands trembled slightly. You're human?" she stammered, stepping back, her mind spinning. "I thought you were a wolf." His lips curved into a faint, grim smile. "I am both," he said, "and more. My name is Kale." He explained the story she could scarcely believe. He was the Alpha King of the wolf clans, a ruler bound by ancient magic and a curse that had transformed him into a wolf. The river had nearly ended his life, but her courage had pulled him back from the brink. He spoke with a solemn pride. Yet, there was a vulnerability in his voice that made Ilara ache in an unexplainable way. "The curse was placed by my rival," Kale continued, his gaze distant. "He sought to take my kingdom while I was weakened. To walk the world as a man, as a wolf, is my burden until I reclaim my throne and undo what was done to me." Ilara's heart pounded. She wanted to reach out, to touch his hand, to offer comfort, but the weight of his presence made her hesitate. There was authority, power, and danger radiating from him. Yet beneath it all, there was a deep weariness, a need for trust that only she could provide. Why are you here now?" she asked softly. "Because I must repay the life you saved," Kale said. He stepped closer, and Ilara noticed the subtle scars on his arms, the marks of battles she could not see. "And because the danger is not gone, my rival knows where I am. Anyone who aids me becomes entangled in forces they do not understand." Ilara felt a shiver run down her spine. The forest seemed to close in around them, the wind dying, the trees holding their breath. "I only helped a wounded creature," she said quietly, trying to mask the flutter in her chest. I never meant. You did more than save me. Kale interrupted, his eyes locking with hers. You saved the Alpha King, the leader of my people, the one who carries the weight of the clans. Her fingers clutched the pendant in her satchel. Somehow, she knew it was connected to him, to his curse, and perhaps even to his power. The weight of her actions, simple though they had seemed, pressed on her like the roots of the forest itself. Kale's presence drew her into a strange orbit. There was tension in the air, unspoken, like a storm waiting to break. Every movement, every glance, carried weight. He did not demand, but his authority was undeniable. She felt both drawn to him and cautious, as though every heartbeat carried the possibility of danger. For the next days, Kale remained in the forest, rarely leaving the shadowed paths where she worked. He watched, studied, and at times tested her resolve. He asked her to gather herbs for his wounds, to prepare poultices, and to tend to scars that were both physical and magical. With every touch, every shared moment, the tension between them grew. Ilara began to see a different side of him. Beneath the regal bearing, the sharp instincts of a king, there was pain, memories of betrayal, loss, and the loneliness of leadership. He would stare into the fire for long moments, eyes distant, as if recalling moments too heavy to speak aloud. She felt a pull toward him, a desire to soothe, to heal, even though the distance between them was defined by power, pride, and unspoken rules. One night, as the moon hung low, casting silver light through the canopy, Kale and Ilara sat together by the riverbank. She was cleaning a wound on his arm, the fabric damp with herbal salve. His gaze lingered on her, unblinking. "Do you ever fear what you are?" she asked softly, glancing at him. Kale's jaw tightened. "I fear nothing more than failing those who depend on me," he said. "And yet, I fear losing what I cannot name." Ilara's breath caught. The words seemed to hang between them, fragile and dangerous. She wanted to reach out, to bridge the unspoken gap. But the forest, the night, and Kale's own intensity held her back. Days passed in this delicate balance. Ilara learned to read Kale's moods, to anticipate his needs, and to navigate the subtle power he carried. She discovered that his presence could silence the forest or command it, a reminder of the ancient force he wielded. And Kale, in turn, began to trust her in ways he had never allowed another to see. But the danger they could not escape crept ever closer. Strange shadows flitted in the trees. Unnatural noises whispered through the forest. And Ilara began to notice that animals she had tended to, foxes, birds, deer, avoided certain areas, as though sensing a darkness she could not yet see. Then, one evening, while gathering night-blooming herbs, she heard the forest erupt in unnatural fire and shadow. Branches snapped, and smoke rose in twisted ribbons. Ilara ran toward the chaos, her heart pounding, calling Kale's name. He appeared as if from the shadows themselves, moving with unnatural speed. But even as he approached, she saw the wound that bloomed across his chest, a dark mark burning like a brand. His breath came in shallow gasps, and the golden glow of his eyes dimmed for a moment. A rare crack in his unyielding presence. "Ilara," he whispered, his voice strained. "They know we exist, and they will not stop until one of us falls." Panic rose in her chest. Who is doing this?" Kale's gaze softened briefly as he placed a hand on her shoulder. "The rival who cursed me. The one who sought to destroy my kingdom. He will not hesitate to strike at anyone who aids me, and that includes you." Fear and determination warred inside Ilara. She had never imagined herself as part of a battle larger than the forest itself. Yet she knew, in that moment, that she could not leave him. She could not abandon the life she had saved. The weight of destiny pressed down on her shoulders. heavy and unrelenting. Kael's breathing steadied as he drew strength from her presence. She felt the pulse of his power, faint but undeniable, coursing through the air like a living thing. The forest itself seemed to respond to him, whispering and shifting as if acknowledging his return, even wounded and challenged. They retreated to a hidden clearing, where Kael could recover and where Alara could tend to his wounds. The air was thick with tension, but also with something unspoken: connection, trust, and the beginnings of a bond neither fully understood. "Alara," Kael said, his voice low and raw, "I owe you more than my life. You saved me when no one else could, and for that, I will not let you face this alone." Her fingers brushed against his as she cleaned his wound, and a shiver ran through her. She knew the weight of his gaze, the power he carried, and yet, the night was silent around them, except for the distant roar of the river. And in that quiet, the forest seemed to hold its breath. Alara realized that saving a wolf had brought her into a world she could not have imagined, a world of power, magic, and unspoken rules. And more than that, it had brought her closer to a man who was both dangerous and extraordinary, a king bound by fate and a curse, yet dependent on her courage and care. As the moon climbed higher, a chill wind whispered through the clearing, carrying with it a sense of foreboding. The shadows moved in ways that felt deliberate, and Alara knew, with a shiver, that the danger Kael spoke of was no longer distant. It was coming. And when it arrived, neither of them would be ready. The forest was tense, alive with a quiet unease. Even the river, once a place of solace and healing, seemed restless, its waters churning with invisible currents. Alara moved swiftly along the narrow path, the silver pendant heavy in her pocket. Kael walked beside her, his steps careful but assured. Though he appeared calm, the wound across his chest still burned faintly, a reminder that their enemies were not far behind. "The Sacred Heart is close," Kael said, his voice low, carrying the authority of a king. "If we reach it, the curse can be lifted, and my rival will no longer hold power over me or the clans." Alara glanced at him, her heart tightening. The man beside her was not just a warrior or a king. He was a being caught between worlds, human and wolf, strength and vulnerability. Every glance, every small movement, carried a silent weight. She could not help but feel drawn to him, though she knew the path ahead would demand courage, cunning, and the kind of trust that often terrified those who dared to give it. The trees thickened as they approached the forest's heart. Ancient oaks towered above, their roots twisting like serpents through the moss-covered ground. Strange runes were carved into their bark, faintly glowing under the moonlight. This place hummed with power, older than any human memory, older than the forest itself. "This is where the old magic sleeps," Kael whispered. "Where the curse can be broken, if we are prepared." Alara's hands shook slightly as she adjusted the satchel with herbs. "What must I do?" she asked. Kael's golden eyes met hers. And for a moment, the weight of leadership, the memory of betrayal, and the raw pain of the curse softened into something almost tender. "Be ready to act with your heart," he said. "The forest will guide us, but it will test us. It will not yield to fear." The ground trembled subtly as they moved deeper. Shadows stretched unnaturally, twisting as if alive, and the wind carried whispers that were not quite human. Alara's pulse quickened. She had seen signs of magic before, but never so powerful, so raw, so palpable. They reached a clearing where a pool of still water reflected the night sky like black glass. Around the pool, stones carved with ancient symbols formed a circle. The air was thick with energy, making Alara's hair stand on end. Kael knelt beside the pool, placing a hand on the water's surface. Ripples spread outward, silver light dancing across his face. "The curse," he said softly, "feeds on fear, anger, and the doubts we carry. We must face it together." Alara stepped forward, heart pounding. How? I don't have magic. You have courage, Kale said. More than you know. That is enough. He reached for her hand, and a spark of warmth ran through her. Together, they knelt, hands hovering over the water, eyes locked. A low hum rose from the circle of stones, resonating deep within the earth. Shadows from the forest seemed to gather, twisting into shapes that reflected Kale's rival. A dark figure, cruel and imposing, its eyes burning with jealousy and malice. You cannot defeat me alone, the shadow hissed, its voice like gravel scraping stone. The Alpha King will remain trapped, and his helpers will fall. Kale's jaw tightened. I am no longer alone, he said, his voice steady, though his chest ached with pain. And neither is she. The shadow lunged from the edges of the clearing, a swirling mass of darkness. Alara froze for a heartbeat, then remembered Kale's words. Courage, not magic, would guide them. She stepped forward, holding the silver pendant aloft. Its glow strengthened, reacting to her presence, as if it recognized her heart. The shadow recoiled at the light. Kale moved beside her, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. Together, they focused, their determination merging with the pendant's power. The water of the pool shimmered and rose, glowing tendrils of silver light twisting around them and the shadow alike. Kale faced the darkness fully, summoning the strength of the Alpha King within him. The golden glow of his eyes flared, bright enough to illuminate the forest around them. The shadow shrieked, twisting violently, then slowly began to dissolve under the combined force of Kale's will and Alara's courage. Now, Alara, Kale called, his voice strong but urgent. Focus on the heart, on what you believe. She closed her eyes and thought of every small act of care she had given. The birds she had mended, the deer she had freed, the wolf she had saved from the river. She thought of the man before her, wounded, powerful, yet trusting her completely. Her hand pressed firmly on the pendant, and a wave of silver light shot into the pool, washing over Kale and the shadow simultaneously. The forest itself seemed to respond. Trees bowed slightly, roots shifted, and the whispering voices faded into a deep, resonant silence. When Alara opened her eyes, Kale was standing, whole, unburdened by the curse. The wound across his chest had vanished, leaving only faint traces of memory. The golden light in his eyes shone brighter than ever, filled with both power and gratitude. Kale turned to her, his expression softened, yet intense. You did this, he said, voice low and reverent. Without you, I would still be trapped, and the clans would suffer. Alara felt warmth flood her chest. We did it. Together, she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. He stepped closer, their hands brushing. You faced fear when it could have destroyed you, Kale said, eyes searching hers. You showed courage that even I could not have expected. The tension between them, ever present since the river, now shifted. It was no longer only danger, but connection, trust, and a fragile, growing bond. Alara felt drawn to him, not just because he was powerful, but because he trusted her completely, depended on her heart and spirit. For a moment, the forest fell silent around them. The river's roar softened into a gentle murmur. Leaves rustled lightly in a protective breeze, and the first light of dawn filtered through the canopy. Kyle lifted her hand to his lips, a gesture both respectful and intimate. Alara's breath caught. Your courage has saved me, Kale whispered. And now, I wish to keep you close, not as a subject, not as a healer, but as someone who walks beside me, as equal, as ally, as more, if you will allow it. Alara's heart swelled. She had entered the forest thinking her life would remain quiet, tending to small creatures. living within the safety of solitude. Instead, she had saved a king, faced darkness, and discovered a bond that challenged everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and destiny. I will stay, she said finally, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. Not because I must, but because I choose to. Kale's eyes softened, a rare smile breaking through the intensity that had defined him. Then, the forest itself shall bear witness to our bond, he said, and the clans will know that their Alpha King walks not alone, but with one who is strong, wise, and brave. The silver pendant, once a silent symbol of power and mystery, glowed faintly, as if acknowledging her choice, a bridge between the human world and the ancient magic that now rested in harmony. As the first rays of the sun touched the forest floor, Kael and Elara stood together, their hands entwined. The danger of the rival lingered in the far reaches of the kingdom, but in this moment, they had found strength in each other, trust, courage, and the bond forged through fire and shadow had triumphed. Yet even as they breathed in the quiet of victory, a whisper drifted through the trees, gentle but certain. The path is never fully safe, but those who walk it together are stronger than any curse, stronger than any shadow. Elara looked at Kale, golden eyes meeting hers, and knew the truth of it. They had faced darkness, but they had faced it together, and whatever trials awaited beyond the forest, whatever dangers lurked in the wider world, they would face them side by side. The river flowed, steady and eternal, carrying away the remnants of shadows and curses. The forest seemed to sigh in relief, the wind gentle, and the birds' songs returned, timid but full of life. Elara and Kael stood at the edge of the sacred clearing, knowing that their journey had only begun. The curse was broken, the Alpha King restored, and a bond had been forged that neither time nor danger could easily sever. For the first time since the river, Elara felt truly at peace, not because the forest was safe, but because the man she had saved, and who had saved her in return, was by her side. And in the depths of the forest, where shadows once thrived, light now lingered. Not just sunlight, but the quiet, enduring light of trust, courage, and love that had been born in the river's depths and nurtured in the heart of the forest.